Good morning, Bitcoiners. Good morning. Sun is up. Bitcoin is running, but there was a bit of a hang-up last night. About 13,000 transactions caught up in the mempool. Hold on 1 second. Somehow all my settings got adjusted this morning. So I'm hoping my camera is still mirrored, and I hope everything is as I left it. Yeah, there was an issue in Bitcoin last night. A bunch of transactions. I think it was related to the difficulty rate. Haven't seen what happened, but it looks like transactions are getting processed through and the traffic jam is easing. So we can have our coffee and talk about the news. What a weekend. What a weekend. We've talked about the Arizona race a lot on the show, and there's some, comedy gold. So we got to talk about it today. So there's these two female candidates, Katie Hobbs and Kari Lake, and they're running for the governor of Arizona. And Arizona is one of these really contested races in the United States. If you're not paying attention, America has its midterms coming up, I think next week, 2 weeks from now, 3 weeks from now. They'll be the first week of November. So every 2 years, there's an election in the United States. Every 4 years, that election is presidential. And every 2 years, 1/3 of the Senate is selected. A series of governors are selected, all the congressmen, all that kind of stuff. So senators in the United States, I don't know if you know, they do 6-year terms. So about 1/3 of the Senate is always changing. So it's not everyone at once, it rolls over. But it's the turn of the Arizona governors to go. They've got a Senate race there as well. That's why things are so interesting. So they've got a Senate race happening and a governorship. So big news. So the main story out of it is that the Democrat candidate won't debate the Republican candidate in public. So there's no public debate. She's kind of avoiding it all the time. There was a camera crew called Project Veritas that infiltrated this Democrat candidate's campaign and found out, they got really frank quotes from them saying she won't debate, it's not going to go well for us, we don't want to do it. Because the thing is, if you don't know this, the Republican candidate, Kari Lake, is on another level of persuasion. She could be president from what I see right now. She was a former media person. She's just a normal talking head who would recite lines and read the news, as we say, right? They read the news. They have a teleprompter, they read the news. So she was a news reader. So she speaks really well, obviously, because that's part of her job, is to pronounce things well and be really good on camera. But it looks like that skill set was a limitation for her, in the sense that her abilities look far greater than what she was able to display as a newscaster. So what we're seeing of her in the live environment is remarkable. She's really quick on her toes. She's very confrontational with mainstream media, and she's beautiful. So that thing where like a beautiful woman laughs at you or insults, whatever it is, but in a not a mean way, right? In a coherent way, it hurts a little more sometimes. And she really has that attitude of being able to dismiss journalists with the wave of a hand, and it really hits. I mean, it really hits when she does it. And she happened to be on CNN yesterday. They invited her on CNN talking about the elections, and they tried to push her and say, are you undermining faith in elections by saying the 2020 elections had issues? And her response was to the CNN person, well, in 2018, Stacey Abrams never conceded. She still hasn't. So Stacey Abrams ran for governor of Georgia, and she is again this year. So I don't hear CNN calling her an election denier. So right away, she pushes back. She says the thing that isn't polite, but that's not the funny part. The reason I'm bringing all of this up is this Katie Hobbs woman. First of all, there's a hilarious video of her being chased by a journalist who's trying to get a quote from her. She had to hide in a bathroom. And, I shouldn't have to say why this is part of the story, but the journalist himself was black, right? So the journalist was black, and, an African-American journalist, right? Shouldn't be a story. But in the context of what has happened this weekend, it is a story. So she ran away from this black journalist, right? Now, she would have run away from a white journalist. I don't believe that she ran away because he was black. So if you're hearing me say that she ran away because the journalist was black, wrong. But here's why it's important. She had a bunch of high school pictures resurface this weekend. And it turns out she participated in something called a slave day, where students, probably to learn about slavery, right? This was quite a while ago. She's not so old, but this sounds like a 1980s situation. They actually, practiced at school putting price tags and carrying people around with chains. And it turns out she was sort of like a ringleader of it. And there's a bunch of pictures of her participating in Slave Day. So when you when you take the probably a fake controversy, right? Like it sounds like other people at the school participated, but because she won't talk about it, because she won't say anything about it, and because she now ran away from this Black journalist, it's pretty funny stuff. It's pretty funny. So if you haven't seen it, go have a look. And it brings up all kinds of changes that we're seeing under the surface in politics. And it'll be relevant to our Ukrainian story because we're going to start imagining what the world is like in a few weeks as politics in America change a bit. We're going to get to that. But here are some really interesting polls. The New York Times even mentioning that the biggest shift came from women who identified as independent voters. In September, they favored Democrats by 14 points. Now, independent women backed Republicans by 18 points. So a huge shift there. Glenn Greenwald bringing out a bunch of polling information as well, saying that the three issues that Americans are most worried about are inflation, economy, jobs, and immigration. And people perceive the GOP as very interested in that. And then here was Glenn Greenwald's quote. But they see the Dems as most obsessed with the 3-hour riot that happened almost 2 years ago, of course, referring to the Black Lives Matter stuff in the United States 2 years ago. Then he's talking about political figures, and he says the polls come out and say that in the US, Donald Trump and Mike Pence remain the most popular political figures. Biden and Harris in the toilet. AOC quite popular, but way behind Trump and Pence, but remains somewhat high within U.S. politics. Pelosi, Hillary, McConnell, all of these guys get the worst ratings. So, and then, just like Carrie Lake was on a show yesterday, one of these Sunday shows, I guess you had my senator here from Vermont, Bernie Sanders. And this is why I can never get down with Bernie. So he's on the Chuck Todd MSNBC show yesterday, and they're asking him about Fetterman. Remember, we've been talking about Fetterman, where CNN had to bring like a brain model onto the set to show like where his brain isn't working. So you had Sanjay Gupta like pointing to parts of a brain that were broken. You don't want to be in that position, right? You don't want to be where they're talking about your brain model on TV and showing where it's broken. And he was like, and here's the language part, and that doesn't work. So here's the language part. And we don't mind that, right? Not having a brain that's functional, I don't think says you can't be running in politics. I'm okay with it. I'm for the cats. I'm for the cat candidates, the cat mayors, right? I like all of. I'll always vote cat. I'll vote cat down the ballot if I can. And brain person could be, right? He does other things. He has enough brain working that he is able to actually say things that I don't really agree with. So I wouldn't vote for him. But it's not because of the brain problem, right? It's not because of the brain problem. But here's Bernie, right? So Chuck Todd asks, do you think Fetterman should be releasing more of his medical records since he's asking for a 6-year term? Remember, we said there are 6-year terms in the Senate. And Bernie's answer was, I don't know enough. I don't know what's going on. Now, here's the problem with Bernie, right? And look, a lot of what Bernie says and does, I'm down with, right? I'm with Bernie most of the way. I'm further than Bernie on some issues, right? Not on taxation and taking money from people, but on a lot of issues, like Bernie's directionally got it, right? But here's where he fails. I would say here's where he fails. And it was just like his presence in the 2020 election and the 2016 election. He's not honest. He hides stuff, right? He doesn't say what he means, and he couches everything he does in political calculations. So how can he really be the maverick that he pretends to be if he's never going to say what he means, right? He let the Democrats steal the election from them. I think he could have beat Trump in 2016. I do. As big of a fan as I was of 2016 Trump, trust me, when Hillary beat him, I said that's the only way Trump can make it. He could have beaten Trump, but the party didn't want it. Just like in 2020, The party didn't want him to beat Biden. He could have beaten Biden, no problem. I don't think he would have beaten Trump in 2020. I thought his chance was 2016. I could be wrong. I'm not trying to argue these points and be right about them. That was just my impression. And so when 2020 came around, he had a chance to really say what a crap deal he got. Right? He got a crap deal from the Democrats, and he never said it. He never went out and said that he was being abused by a political system. So how do you really trust this guy who's quick to accuse others of abusing in the economy, in this industry, in that industry? So he's capable of pointing a finger, right? But he couldn't point a finger at the hand that fed him. And once that happens, in the world we live in today, and we're going to talk about that more, that's sort of the theme of this show, is, you know, in the world today, if you choose to couch your language in a certain way and it's obvious to everyone, all your credibility is gone, because we have the tools to be able to speak publicly. And if you have something that needs to be said, you got to say it. And if it's important, even if it hurts you, you could in the long run benefit from it. And he chose not to, and he chose not to here again, right? He chose again to toe the party line and to be as boring as Bernie can be. So it's boring Bernie again, right? I wish Bernie would just be a little more bombastic and a little more off the cuff, and it would be great. But that's not who he is, and he's made his decisions. So he did not tell the truth. And like I said, on Twitter now, things are changing, right? Things are changing. We've seen with Elon's push already on Twitter, we've seen all kinds of accounts come back online. Mad Liberals was one that was cut in the 2020 election, back online out of nowhere. You've got people that are, pushing for Project Veritas to get back on, pointing out that there's been bans for people that share Project Veritas videos. So even sharing of a Project Veritas video is getting people banned. That looks like it's going away. Carpe Donktum looks like he might be back on. Carpe Donktum was kicked off of Twitter because he made a meme video about children reuniting during the pandemic, and CNN had tried to say that there was some racism involved in the video, and then it turned out we saw the real video and the kids were happy. So he went further and doctored a video that showed them to be like super racist, but it was a doctored video. And it didn't work out, so they canceled him. They said the reason was that he had shown addresses when he was, that was the Project Veritas one, that they were kicked off because they showed someone's address when they chased down a lead in a story, and that was called doxing. But of course, CNN doxed a million people along these lines. So there's a story where they doxed a Florida woman who was one of the people that retweeted one of the Russia bot or whatever, the propaganda creation Twitter accounts that Russia used that were so-called Russia collusion. She had retweeted it, so CNN went, so why'd you retweet this? Where'd you get it from? And she's just a kind of a hick saying, I just saw it on the internet, I retweeted it, I don't know anything. But of course they had her address on TV and it was caught on the camera, and they doxed her, and she had tons of death threats and never heard anything about it. But all that to say, Twitter looks like things are changing. But anyway, news this morning that Kanye West has bought Twitter competitor, or is trying to buy Twitter competitor Parler. So Kanye was kicked off of Twitter last week, and now this week he's going ahead and buying Parler. And Parler, if you don't know, it's got Dan Bongino, who I think is part of the ownership group, and they have a paid service, which is called Locals. It's like a subscription service, and Dave Rubin is behind that one. Dave Rubin being what I would call one of the best examples of a classical liberal. So he's like a liberal refugee who used to do Young Turks videos and all kinds of more left-leaning stuff before, became one of the early refugees, started his own thing in 2016 around the Trump time, and it's done very, very well. And he's grown it, and it's now a pretty big platform. He was the fella that went on the road for a couple of years as well with Jordan Peterson. He was the person who would interview Jordan Peterson about the 12 Steps book. So the 12 Steps, when he did the book tour, and you bought tickets and you went to a stadium. If you remember, there was all kinds of people who did that. It was like an event. You could go listen to a Jordan Peterson talk. Dave Rubin was the guy who went on the road with him and interviewed him the whole time. So that's who Dave Rubin is. So Dave Rubin owns a subscription piece of this called Locals, and Kanye is coming and buying the main platform, Parler. And this is important because we saw Kanye kind of lay a trap. I mean, can we go that far and say that it was a trap? He said a bunch of stuff, some of it controversial, especially about protecting himself, I guess the DEFCON 3, protecting himself against cancelers that were Jewish. And now I'm totally not interested in any Jewish people run the media stuff, right? Like that doesn't work as far as I see the world. It doesn't fit my worldview. But he said it, and if you think it's to get canceled, which he did, then it makes more sense, right? If you're trying to get canceled, you do it, you get canceled, but then you turn around and buy a platform that allows you to have these conversations, then it sort of makes more sense. So Kanye West has bought Parler, or trying to buy Parler. So that means there's legit competition with Donald Trump's platform, Truth Social. And remember, Elon Musk has said when he buys Twitter, he's going to reinstate all of these banned accounts, including Trump. Trump said he won't go on because he's got his own platform now, but pretty sure they'll find a way. If you follow the blue sky stuff that Jack Dorsey left behind, it looks like there'll be a way to log into Twitter with different platforms, and it should be open source enough that other platforms will be able to port over identities and be able to broadcast on in the Twitter environment. So, but that's just my casual understanding of what he's proposing. I don't know if that's exactly it. But here's what's now happening to Kanye. So Kanye had another interview this weekend. We talked about it yesterday in the show. I'd say the only criticism I had was the alcohol on the set, because I thought, to me, when I read the tweet about DEFCON 3 when it first came out, when he did get banned, I just sort of smelled alcohol in the tweet. I don't know if I'm right. I just could, when people drunk tweet or whatever, I could see it. The show itself having some alcohol. So I'd like to see a little more sobriety, but nevertheless, it was a good interview. And it looks like, so he came out and said that George Floyd was killed from fentanyl and not from the boot on his neck. Now, we know for a fact that George Floyd was found with fentanyl in his system. We do not know if it had any role in his death, right? I don't know what the autopsy says. The autopsy I think is heavily politicized, but let's just pretend the autopsy is accurate. I know they did find fentanyl. I don't think it was linked directly to his death. I think that the official story remains what we're going to go with here, that the police officer, Derek Chauvin, I think was his name, ended his life. But what Kanye said on this interview the other day caused a lot of ruckus. And now it turns out that George Floyd's family might consider suing Kanye West. And what this is an example of is something called lawfare, warfare, but lawfare. And what you do is you basically just arm up anyone who is saying something that's a little bit crazy, and you sue the hell out of them. So we've seen this now with Alex Jones. He had the $1 billion settlement last week. We've seen it with the January 6 folks, right? They're caught up in the legal system. Donald Trump is constantly in the legal system for these things, right? There's this time we got him, right? This time he's gonna get it. This is the downfall. The walls are closing in on Trump. The walls are closing in, right? How many times have we heard the walls are closing in? And that's lawfare, right? That's lawfare. So every one of these people is just, bereft, filled with legal problems at the same time, right? And what does it all mean? How do we deal with a news system that will just stick you into the fake prison of two ideas, right? It's all of the things we've talked about today are the prison of two ideas, right? Kari Lake, Arizona, Democrat, Republican, censorship, pro-Democrat, anti-Democrat, censorship, right? It's the fake prison of two ideas writ large. Now, if we go and have a look at the Ukraine situation, that's one of the most explicit examples of the fake prison of two ideas. Oh, let me get the chat up because I did intend to take. Morning, everyone. Morning, Justin. Doxing rules for thee, but not for thee. Yeah, Ye said, kill me in 7 ways. He just might get his wish. Yeah. Yeah, I know who Drink Champs is all about alcohol. I know. It's just that maybe that wasn't the right venue. I don't know. I just, when people speak with that aggression of alcohol, to me, it you know, especially someone like Kanye, who is so well spoken in his normal temperament, just a little bit of anger. I'm not criticizing him. The point here is not to say alcohol bad in all instances. Don't do it. I won't listen to you. It's just that the ability to, basically push the arguments he was presenting in that session are somewhat weakened because he was under the influence, right? It's like you can't say that he was speaking his exact mind. He might have been under the influence. But anyway, the fake prison of two ideas thing is really important in this instance, because here's my prediction. With the elections that we've talked about a lot today, with the changing of the guard in social media, Elon or now Kanye, so we have multiple options of avenues for conversation to break out that isn't stuck in the fake prison of two ideas, right? So an election coming up in a few weeks in America and changes in social media mean the following. The space is opening up in Ukraine to get conversation around peace plans that doesn't involve the fake prison of two ideas, right? That doesn't involve the fake prison of two ideas. And this is what it looks like. And here's my prediction. In a month, it's going to be normal. It's going to be normalized to present peace plans. It's not really there yet, right? Elon got heavily criticized for his initial peace plan. And I understand why. If you're Ukraine or America in this instance, right, you don't sue for peace, you're winning. Why would you sue for peace? It looks like Russia is pretty screwed, right? You don't sue for peace. So I understand why people would say, no, peace, no, it's not going to happen. But changes are coming, right? The president, his job changes if he loses the House and the Senate in America in a couple of weeks. His ability to affect this stuff is limited, especially when you've got Trump coming out with his own peace plans, right? Trump is saying, we can do this, we can do that. You've got a whole bunch of people starting to come up with peace plans. But here's what I think the peace plans are going to start focusing on. And this is why it's important. And this is why the fake prison of two ideas gets broken, and where Bitcoin, I think, has a tremendous role and can absolutely level up and help us solve the problem in Ukraine. And here's what it looks like. So in about a month, it'll be normalized to speak about peace plans. A whole slew of those peace plans are going to be about making a neutral zone, right? A neutral zone where the Russian-controlled part that was formerly Ukraine, everything taken in 2014, basically, in that original skirmish. Part of these plans, a lot of them, are going to be to make that an international zone, right? Like some kind of cooperative space. And what does cooperative space mean? It's kind of like how they ended World War II. You make cooperative spaces in Germany. They split parts of Europe. They occupied towns. And there was, if you remember Vienna at the time, there was a British quarter, an American quarter, and a Russian quarter filled with criminals because of the way these quarters were sectioned off and the way it operated. There's a classic movie called The Third Man, which I recommend everyone watch, Orson Welles. And he's there diluting penicillin for children between these different markets and making a fortune. And very famous speech that he gives about what he's doing and justifying it to himself. And he says something along the lines of, in Italy for 500 years, they had murder and this and that and the Borgias and all kinds of trouble in the Roman city republics. And it was chaos, and there's absolutely no democracy in the way these things ran. I'm paraphrasing. I don't remember how Orson Welles exactly said it. Yet they invented the Italian Renaissance and all these art things. And he goes, in Switzerland, it was not 500 years of craziness. It was Italy, a few years of craziness, talking about all these people And what did they invent? The Italian Renaissance, Michelangelo, all this stuff, Leonardo, da, 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 da. And he says in Switzerland for 500 years, they've had peace, democracy, brotherly love, no leaders. What did they invent? The cuckoo clock. So he's contrasting chaos and what it can create, stability and what it can create. And it's cuckoo clock versus the Italian Renaissance. It's a very funny quote, right? Very funny. So that was just one example of how they ended wars back then, right? They split up land and everyone took their jurisdiction and they went with it. Well, what we see now is possibly a way to modernize and alter the way those shared plans worked on physical space. And here's my idea. So to rephrase, in about a month, there's going to be a ton of plans being bandied about peace plans, about peace in Ukraine. Some of those plans are going to incorporate a neutral zone where they're still fighting Donbass and Crimea and these things. And what I'm saying now is that there's going to be a bunch of debate about that, around that, but we can inject a Bitcoin plan into that conversation and see if it treads, see if it tracks, see if it gets attention. And here's what it would look like. So now you're imagining a third neutral zone in the middle, right? A third neutral zone. You've got Ukraine, you've got Russia. You're going to make this a neutral zone. What does a neutral zone mean in a Bitcoin plan? Well, it just means this. You turn it into a psychological space, which means it's both Russia and Ukraine at the same time. And the citizens in that place just have to choose which system they want, but on a daily basis. They don't have to choose forever. There's no ID card. There's nothing like that, right? You just basically say, this is Ukrainian and Russian, right? You're both Ukrainian, you're both Russian. You live in this third place. Some form of international governance around basic provisions, but not really, because here's how the psychological space of this works. Instead of limiting the physical service delivery like they did in Vienna, you literally just make it a psychological space about choice. And then you take the parties, Russia, Ukraine, America, and basically you take their systems, and it's their goal now to deliver services to the people, right? Not get a truck and run in there and feed them food. No. It's not that. This is kind of what it looks like. It's about attracting people to your system of providing things, right? So in the same way that countries have become kind of, they take their citizens for granted because they don't really have the negotiating power to move around and push jurisdictions against each other and pit them against each other to attract talent. It's starting a little in small jurisdictions. You know, it's sort of hinted at in The Sovereign Individual, where the authors say the changes implied by the information revolution will not create a fiscal crisis for governments. They will tend to disintegrate all large structures. 14 empires have disappeared already in the 20th century. The breakdown of empires is part of a process that will dissolve the nation state itself. Government will have to adapt to the growing autonomy of the individual. Taxing capacity will plunge by 50 to 70%. This will tend to make smaller jurisdictions more successful. The challenge of setting competitive terms to attract able individuals and their capital will be more easily undertaken in enclaves than across continents. So what they're saying here is the attraction of people to your jurisdiction, right? We're not really in the game. A little islands, you know, Barbados, a few of these places, some US states, you know, Florida has been really successful attracting people because of the tax stuff, but we're talking about this way more. And it's almost like spinning it around. So what you do here is you say, hey, yeah, everyone, you go live there, right? But there are American systems, Ukrainian systems that can bring you food, right? You can get food from this. You can get energy. You can get weapons, right? We're not going to shut down the industrial war machine. We're not going to shut it down, right? That's why it wouldn't get shut down. What we're saying here is everyone can arm up. You can give people guns. You can give that side guns, because there's still a Ukraine and there's still a Russia in this situation. So we're not shutting down, you know, not because we don't want to, but because practically, if you keep it running, the chances of getting peace remain high. So you basically just make it a race to provide services and things to the people. And then they can choose whatever it is they want, right? They can go get energy from a US-backed energy provider. They can get energy from a Russian-backed energy provider. Both Russians and Americans create nuclear energy, right? They can push those systems into the country, and you can almost make it like a way to make up for the Chernobyl disaster, where, you know, Ukraine's so known for its nuclear disaster could be known for nuclear innovation, right? Because all the fighting there is right now about the different systems anyway, right? And we see the BRICS thing starting big time, right? BRICS. You know what BRICS is? It's the, you know, Brazil, Russia, India. It's these countries that don't want the petrodollar. And it looks like Saudi Arabia is joining as of yesterday. Saudi Arabia has said they're going to be joining BRICS, right? So that's another one. So you've got BRICS that is now expanding and trying to create an alternative to the dollar. So what you end up doing is you say to people, right, this new BRICS money, you can use the BRICS money, you can use the Ukrainian money, you can use the US dollar. And there isn't really Ukrainian money, by the way, right? It's used, but it's been screwed up so many times, and it's not really integrated into the European system. Like Ukrainian bank cards don't work in Europe or America. I guess there was a lot of fraud. I noticed when I was working with Kraken that it was very hard to integrate Ukrainian rails versus the rest of Europe because of whatever reason. But that's the reason why Ukrainians have the highest uptake in Bitcoin, right? That's the reason why Ukraine is one of the countries with the most Bitcoiners per capita on Earth. And because they haven't had any capacity to get, let's see what this says. This sounds like the first chapter of the Mandibles. I didn't read that. I'd have to read that. So, so you've got this new currency, the BRICS dollar or whatever they call it, right? The BRICS money. You've got the US dollar that, or the euro even, that can compete over there. And basically, you're just trying to find a way for people to get this money and pay for services, and you're competing in systems. After a number of years, it'll settle into what it is. But you're basically saying, Russians, go provide services to your people, protect your people. They're both protectorates in the system. Both of them have the job of protecting those people that live there, right? That's how you turn it from war into protection. That's how you get these two parties to come together. They're now both responsible for the protection of this area. It's both, it is both of theirs, right? It's both up for them to win. It's not going to be taken away. It's an independent place where both BRICS and US system can provide services. But here's where Bitcoin comes in. Here's the thing about an independent state, right? If you did create an independent third-party state here, and you did want both Russia bloc and American bloc to participate in service provision and to be competitive in service provision in this area, you don't want to pick sides at the start, right? Any side picking will destroy this deal. And what I mean by that is, if this third party kept a balance sheet, for example, or accounted in dollars, already they've implied that they're not even giving the BRICS folks a chance, right? So they can't be keeping books in this third party zone in BRICS money or US dollars. And this is where the Bitcoin thing comes in. They don't have to use Bitcoin. Ukrainians know about Bitcoin because it's one of the most Bitcoin concentrated countries in the world. So it's not foreign to them. But all you would do is the following. You would make this third party, this third country, this neutral zone, hold its books denominated in Bitcoin. They don't have to hold Bitcoin. There's no holding Bitcoin necessarily. They're just accounting for what's going on in their economy, what's going on in their government as far as they provide services in Bitcoin. Because it gives you the reference they need to compare BRICS service provision and US dollar service provision. Which systems provide the people more? They'll be able to measure. They can't measure it in one because it will take meaning out of the other. But if they have a reference to measure which one is better for them, and they can keep choosing. Like I said, if you go and use some US sourced energy and US money to buy some food that was made with US sourced energy in Ukraine one day, and then the next day you say, oh, it's actually better if I go to the Russian power station or the Russian restaurant that's connected to the Russian power station and use the BRICS money, then you can do that. No one will stop you, right? You don't ever have to make a decision forever. all you're doing is constantly forcing these two parties to compete for your attention, right? You're forcing the American bloc and the Russian bloc to want to provide services and security to the people in this neutral zone, Crimea, Donbass, and the other ones. The only way we can get them all to agree to this is by having some reference point to measure which system is providing more of the stuff the people want, which is more successful at bringing peace and prosperity to the third neutral party zone. That's it, right? There's no go get Bitcoin, go use Bitcoin. Nope, nope, nope. That's up to people. All we would use Bitcoin for is a reference so that it doesn't show that the neutral zone has taken sides with the dollar people or the BRICS people. That's all we're trying to do. Keep them away from declaring which side they're on. If they don't have to declare what side they're on, then it's fine. So what you're doing here is basically just creating psychological countries. These are psychological spaces. And the physical land is neutral, but people can signal what they want by taking services and provisions and letting people compete to give them stuff. And the way they measure it is with Bitcoin. Right? That's it. That's it. So again, the prediction is in about a month, there's going to be 1 million peace plans for Ukraine. 1 million. That's all that people are going to be talking about, right? Which peace plan, and a majority of those peace plans are going to have a neutral zone within them. My plan shows how Bitcoin can be the foundation of a neutral zone and can allow these folks to work together. And by the way, so it's depressing that apolitical money is so uninteresting to the masses. Yeah, but this I think is the way to model it. So Justin says, first of all, he highly recommended the Mandibles, which I haven't read. And Justin also said it's depressing that apolitical money is. I'm not so depressed by it. You know, I'm okay with the. We got to show them, right? We got to show them. We got to model what it can do, and that's why I think the Ukrainian thing is great. Now, here's what I also predict. I think the peace plans are going to be a regular part of the conversation, but I think the nuclear stress is going to keep going up until then. Right? I don't think the stress around being in a nuclear war is going anywhere. I think it's going to get much, much worse as we head to the election. So remember, way more tension around the nuclear war. Way more. And that's what's going to help cause these outside of the box, fake prison of two ideas, breaking, third rail ideas. And I think it's up to us Bitcoiners to get our, maybe it's not this one, but I think it's a start, to get a Bitcoin plan forward. Because if we're positioned right, we can prove right here and now why apolitical money is so good. So I understand what Justin's saying, why it's so uninteresting to the masses. They don't get what money has done, right? That's why we call this show The Breakup. We literally call it The Breakup because it's about ending a whole relationship that you didn't know was ending, right? You didn't necessarily know you were giving up all of these things. Like when you break up with a human being in a loving relationship, right? You don't always know what happens next, and that can scare you. So in this case, what we are talking about is creating psychological countries where service provision and money and accounting are all up for grabs. And in the end, what you really just want to do is, you know, let them be able to decide which system is giving them more. You want to induce competition to make these people prosperous. Because right now, it's the part that sucks the most about all this, right? As Americans, we just want to forget about what's happening over in Ukraine, and we can, right? That's the sad part. We can. Like, it doesn't affect us really. And that's also why I don't think a draft would ever work in America. Like, we're not really going to go fight there, right? It's not going to happen. That's a political thing if anyone believes it's going to happen. It's just not. We're not going to do it. So they're on their own kind of over there, right? And that's not in a good place because everyone's, you know, you saw today now the Russians are shooting the drone bombs, you know, what do they call them? They had a name for them. It's terrible. And they fall out of the air, but there was a terrible name. It was kites or something like that. I can't remember what they were calling them. There's a name coming out of it now that's just makes it sound like a video game or like entertainment, but it's ships falling from the sky. It's the Iranian drones, and they're just smashing buildings with them, and it's pretty sad. So, and that's in the Ukraine part. Forget about what's happening in the contested parts where it's tanks everywhere and all the craziness. So, look, the nuclear thing's not going to stop. Tension is going to continue. That's my prediction. We're going to come way closer to nuclear war than we are now. But we need a plan that lets everyone think they're winning. Right? Like if you do it this way, if you really just say it's a psychological space, it's an exit plan for everyone, because a peace plan makes everyone think they won. Right? If you say to the Russians, it's still Russia, right? And you say to the Ukraine, it's still Ukraine. It's the same. It's Ukraine, it's Russia, it's both. You both won. You both won the fight. Now, to really win the fight, you got to bring shit to these people. You got to get them fed. You got to get them armed, right? I'm willing to live with a neutral zone that's 2A to the max, right? Like everyone has a gun. Everybody has a gun. We just keep pushing guns there. And it's the only way to be. Politicians just want to be coddled. Yeah. Audio innovation. I would love if the people here in Northern Ireland to go out on our own as a new independent state and use Bitcoin as the currency and break free of London. Yeah, that's another good one right there. That you Northern Irish people have every claim, just like this part of Ukraine, right? You've been in the middle of this shit for how long now? And no one's looking out for you guys, right? It's the fake prison of two ideas. You're either Irish or you're British. Well, they're both bullshit now, right? Northern Ireland always had reasons why it was different than the rest of Ireland. They're not Catholic. One of the great things about Scotland is their very simple religious structures, which is one of the reasons why America is so successful. A lot of people believe that it was the Scottish church system that allowed America to be so successful, and I'll explain why. It's this simple. Scotland had one of the simplest hierarchies for their church. They were really local, but they insisted on mandatory literacy and education for the kids. So when Scotland had its big time troubles and everyone moved out, and it created the Scottish Enlightenment, right? Adam Smith and all these guys. Well, anywhere they went in the world, they were the only fully literate people. So they set up the banks, they set up the schools, they set up the government. Canada, Hong Kong, a bunch of these places, these are Scottish places, right? Hong Kong was not English. It was Scottish, 100%. These were Scots that were there. These were Scots doing what they did. And Northern Ireland, I'm not saying they're like Scottish, but they're from that tradition, right? They don't have the same Irish grievances and all that stuff. As far as I can tell, you tell me if I'm wrong about this stuff. You know it better than I do. But in my mind, and you know, like I've said, I've seen that money from Northern Ireland before. It was a Bank of Denmark issued note in pounds. Does that make sense? Is such a thing around? Like a Bank of Denmark issued note, but in pounds. Anyway, I think that's a great idea. I think if Northern Ireland flexed its muscle a bit and chose this third rail, the same thing, right? It's a psychological space. British, it's still Britain, it's still Ireland, of course it is, but we get our services and our provisions and we finance our energy using this accounting method, which is Bitcoin, right? I think you don't have to tell anyone they have to use Bitcoin. In this plan, no one has to use Bitcoin, although they do in Ukraine. Luckily, they use a lot of Bitcoin in Ukraine. So the impediment of teaching them what Bitcoin is not there because they've already been debanked. Right? They already have been debanked. So what you end up getting is this situation where all you're doing is saying we're using Bitcoin to measure the relative success of the two groups competing to give you shit and feed you and make you safe. That's it, right? So it's financing of energy grid stuff. And there could even be in this peace plan like cooperation around energy building. Right? I think that's where we're going to get peace with Russia. It's space and nuclear. That's where we have to work together, where we don't want to fight up there. Yeah, Audio Innovation says, yeah, there are a lot of old Scots here. It's a mess here, though. We need a new plan. Yeah, it's a mess. It's a mess. And like a lot of those places, you know, here in New England, it's the same. You lost a lot of energy over the years from people leaving and not wanting to deal with the fighting and no one prioritizing Northern Ireland's peace or prosperity or anything like that. No one competing to make it peaceful and prosperous. No one competing on that level, right? Literally people competing to just have it under its image or something like that, right? So that's what I got, guys. That's what I got. That's what I got today. We got a peace plan, and remember, in a month, I believe these are going to be everywhere, and it's up to us Bitcoiners to inject Bitcoin into this conversation, because just like Justin said, right, it's not so much depressing as how apolitical money is uninteresting to the masses. It's more a challenge. We've got to show why apolitical money is so important. And if we can do that using this mess here, using what's already in our wheelhouse, psychological space, right? We're creating psychological spaces for systems to proliferate. And if we get in there, we're going to be what we can be. We can help you measure which system is better. Is it the Russian thing? It might be, right? World's changing quick. The BRICS system might be better for the people there. It might just be. So we got to let them choose. But if we're in the middle of BRICS and dollars, we allow them the space to not have to choose at the accounting level, right? So if there is this new provisionary third-party government, well, what the hell are they going to do? The minute they establish banking relationships, the minute they hold a balance sheet in either BRICS or dollars, the peace plan's over. They've chosen their system. And what we're saying is choose both. The systems will live independent of the place. You have an accounting mechanism. You guys decide which one's better. And over time, it'll just settle to where it is. And if it doesn't, then that's fine too, because these citizens will psychologically be able to choose what they want and in theory should be happy. All right, team. Have a great day. I think that's all the news. I think I got everything. We'll probably end up talking about Kanye more tomorrow after more comment comes of this. But remember, we also have to get choose both by choosing neither. Yeah, that's what Justin says. Choose both by choosing neither. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, choose both by choosing neither. And I think that gets us out of the trouble over there. Now, what are the chances? I don't think they're great. What I'm trying to do here is really just make sure that in a month, when everyone's going on and on and on about peace plans and neutral zones, that Bitcoin has a plan and an idea of where they fit into that. And I think it's just accounting. That's it. Like we should be the reference. That's it. The Bitcoin standard. And it would be. That's the thing. That's what makes it so powerful. We would basically be saying to them, choose a Bitcoin standard to measure who's more successful at giving you peace and prosperity. That's it, right? Use a Bitcoin standard to measure who gives you peace and prosperity. That's what we're after. That's what we're after. All right, team. Peace. Oh, I'm going to New York tomorrow. So live from New York, special edition. Ciao, ciao.